Thank you all so much for coming. I hope you're having a great show so far for in the 2 hours that we've been able to be on the show floor. I'm overwhelmed, as per usual. I'm sure you all are too. My name is Cassie Smith. I'm the Senior Director of Editorial Content at SupplySide. Okay, I was reading an article like a year ago, and it was about how the cottage cheese industry has grown like 30%, and because of a TikTok trend. And I was like, damn, this is a thing. TikTok is a thing. TikTok is impacting the food and beverage industry. And I was like, how is it impacting product formulation? Like, are we taking trends from TikTok and then are we like putting them as a flavor? If someone likes a flavor on TikTok, do we make a product with it? Answer is yes. And I was like, we need to talk about this. And so we are. So thank you for coming. And I have two amazing people here. Sherry Frey. Sherry's the VP of Total Wellness at Nielsen IQ. And David Sandler, our buddy here, came in at the 11th hour. He is the CEO of Safety Shot. It's Safety Shot now, yes?
Well, we're Sure Shot.
Sure Shot now, sorry, of Sure Shot. And David's you've been in the supplement industry for a long time, but now you're mostly beverages and you do a lot of consulting with beverages for years. So we're very smart people. We're very excited to talk about this. I have questions for them. I'm going to try to leave us, because I think there will be a lot, 5 minutes, maybe 10 at the end. So if you have questions, hang on to them and we'll get to them. Okay, and with that, Sherry, your turn. You're up.
Let's do it. Hi, everyone. So I thought what I would do is share with you, I think the answer is yes. Yes, right? So we've covered that. But I thought I would share with you a bit about how brands, how product engineers are looking at the data in TikTok and kind of what they're doing, so you can get a little bit of that how to. And so I kind of thought I would cover 3 areas for you today, and then we would really kind of dialogue back and forth on how we're seeing this. But one, how brands are looking at emerging brand trends, ingredients, what's in, what's out. I'm going to talk about a few that are kind of in the limelight right now, and then also how they're using this to track consumer wellness priorities and how that's changing. And while we did say TikTok, we're actually going to talk a lot about kind of different areas around direct to consumer or social media in general. And so, one of the main ways that we see product innovators looking at what's happening in either social media or direct to consumer is they're actually looking at the brands. And I will tell you, oftentimes food manufacturers are actually looking at what's happening with supplement direct to consumer trends. So they're really actually trying to see, like, what are the things that our consumers are prioritizing in terms of ingredients or need states. So and you can see here beverages, which I'm really glad we're going to talk about beverages. Beverages is definitely one of those areas where we see a lot of emerging growth. And you can see here in that direct to consumer, it's kind of one of the fastest growing. This is a great space where many manufacturers are actually looking at, okay, who are the brands? What are the attributes? And how loyal are consumers to these brands? So they're watching, like, is this something? And for them, the more that they see certain attributes or ingredients that are in direct-to-consumer brands and have loyalty, it's kind of an indicator that this is an interesting space to go. The other piece is TikTok Shop. And I will tell you, we started measuring this in September of 2023, and I was like, who's buying on TikTok Shop? Oh my gosh. It is fast become, they are the number 8 health and beauty retailer, the number 29 food retailer. So this is a fascinating space to also watch in a specific avenue. And here's what's great about this, right? It is so frictionless for consumers. They're searching, they're buying. I mean, I almost wore some really fabulous earrings today that have skeletons because I was Instagram influenced. I think we all have, products like that, but it's so frictionless. And you can see here some of the top categories that consumers are purchasing on there is candy and gum and beverages, et cetera. Here's the other way food manufacturers are looking at the data. They're actually looking, and we track ingredient trends across the store. And so what you're looking at here is the number of categories in the store where you might see this ingredient show up is across the bottom. So something like collagen, hibiscus, that's in many categories across the store. And then something over on the further left, like camu camu, turkey tail, we know those are growing, but they're not in as many categories. And so this just gives you a little orientation. Many of the food and beverage manufacturers that we work with are tracking the ingredient trends this way. And they're saying, okay, is an ingredient moving across categories in the store? Is it growing in terms of the growth? That's where it kind of falls in terms of that vertical axis. And then what's the size of the bubble? And then they track that against really literally hashtags, right? Like, is this ingredient trending? So something like collagen, 1.5 million hashtags. Something like moringa has got, I think, 108,000. So again, just watching these in terms of, are they moving across the store in formulations, and are they moving across consumer conversations? Also, as you know, one of the big ways that we're seeing so many ingredients, flavors, recipes, just different sorts of cuisines. I think if any of you were in that last session, it was really fantastic. And this is a place where food manufacturers are, of course, watching these, but what they're also watching is they're watching the likes and the saves. So they're not just looking at the hashtag, but they're understanding how many times is someone pulling down this Korean watermelon punch, right? And how are they saving it? Because that is an indication of a consumer level of interest. So this is some work we had done recently on snacking, so I thought it was an interesting highlight. I'll also tell you, we are working with brands who are using this data to track what might be social media challenges, right? What is the consumer conversation? So there's a very emerging conversation around seed oils. And you're starting to see, seed oil certifications, you're seeing crowdsourcing in restaurants. This does affect many products in the store. Something like soybean oil is in 44,000 items. And when you look at that, though, what you want to understand is, are consumers talking about this? And really right now, the consumer conversation around seed oils is very low. But when we look at what they're talking about, and our partners at Spate shared this information with us, we're seeing that they're tying seed oils. The biggest conversation is really around seed oils and inflammation. And I think this idea of using social media to think about what are the ingredients, what are the trends, but also what's the context that the consumer's putting around this. And I really think that this high protein piece brings this to life. So we all know consumers are interested in high protein. In our data, we track when a consumer goes to any retailer website, whether it's Amazon or Walmart or Kroger, we track what they're typing in, and that always helps us kind of understand, like, what's something that's trending even before we may not even have it. I mean, my recent one is einkorn. We saw einkorn popping in terms of consumers searching for it, which really, and then we started realizing that, it's in the store. But you look at this high protein piece, and you can see that, consumers are searching. There's a lot of hashtags on it. We're seeing a lot of growth in those products that are over 25 milligrams of protein per serving. But when you actually then tie that to the consumer conversation around protein, what we found really interesting is it's not just about weightlifting. There's a big conversation around women's health and PCOS and reproductive health tied to high protein. So again, it gives you that additional context of really what's driving and what's underneath that macro trend. And then the final piece is, that we wanted to share is that we're really seeing a lot of interesting conversations in social media tied to mental health, which is tied to product formulations. It's tied to the growth of things like nootropics or mood and stress as a claim, certain ingredients like ashwagandha. And so we, also wanted to share that this is kind of an area where we see people looking at those macro trends and kind of bringing those into the local areas. And with that, let's chat.
Thank you, Sherry. David, would you mind talking to us a little bit about how you're utilizing TikTok/social media?
Yeah, so we're brand new into the using TikTok, but we're brand new as a company being on the market. We've only been out since January, and we have a very unique and one-of-a-kind product. We truly do. I'm not here to try to sell you that by any means, but the TikTok was not an if, it was a when. There was definitely a must. And so for us to get into it, we're available on it now, but it was a bit clunky to start up, and there's a whole lot of interesting things that I could certainly share with you. And if you have questions after and we don't have time, we're always glad to share our knowledge that we're learning. There are a lot of nuances in beverage trying to get it up on a TikTok site. And one thing that maybe many don't know is TikTok has a extremely low tolerance to misses, meaning you have 24 to 48 hours to get something shipped, and then it has to be in the hands of the consumer within 24 to 48 hours after that. So you have a very short window which means your 3PL or whoever you're using, your fulfillment center, has to be aware of that window. So that alone starts making you think about your challenges, the costs associated with developing things, how you're going to warehouse, where you're going to warehouse, or who you're going to have fulfill. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. It's not just about making a product always, it's about being able to get a product out there. And from the formulation side, we're just seeing, this was great. I love data. I do everything on data. And I believe every formulator, every scientist out there should be, looking at data and figuring out the next steps. So if you either have something extremely unique, you might not need as much data behind it because you're brand new and unique and really one of a kind. Otherwise, you need this data to drive your product development for sure. Look at the trends, figure out what works best.
And Shelly, this is for you because you're in the audience. Can you talk a little bit about the regulatory challenges of being on TikTok, or maybe the challenge for the industry is that there are none? It's not stringent enough. Like, say whatever you want. And you can talk about this too, Sherry. But I'll start with you, David.
Yeah, well, we know Amazon's gotten really, really tough. In fact, we got kicked off of Amazon, and we didn't even make any claims that weren't legal. We just had enemies who didn't like what we're doing because we are brand new. And that made it even somewhat difficult to get onto TikTok. And now there is talk, and I know TikTok is now being able to be fulfilled through an Amazon mechanism as well. And so my guess is TikTok is going to adopt pretty much everything that Amazon is continually adding to their, to what they do. Mostly claims, ingredients that shouldn't be in the product, but claims are where Amazon's low-lying fruit are because it's an easy lookup, an easy way to check you out. And so there is a lot of nuances there and getting some expertise and help on what you can and can't say. Because you'd be surprised what people think is a drug claim or a disease claim. They're seeming to find a lot more ways to look at some of the claims that we've all been making that have been non-drug oriented for a long time.
Sherry, anything to add there on the regulatory side? I know that's not your bag. I do want to ask, what are maybe some things to keep in mind? So if you're a brand, you are wanting to develop a product and you're going to social media to do some listening about like maybe what to develop or a flavor or a specific ingredient. What are some maybe things to keep in mind if you do that? So context, maybe you shouldn't take it seriously. Maybe the TikTok users don't know what they're talking about and it doesn't work and they shouldn't have it. But if there's money to be made, there's some conflict there. So can you offer any insight there?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that we're watching, and again, not just TikTok, but social media, is the power of influencers and the fact that consumers trust influencers, unfortunately, even more than science, right? And there's a variety of influencers out there. And so I think, one of the challenges, I agree with you, right? It's the claims that are being made. It's also, frankly, and we're watching this a little bit already in the beauty industry, and you look at like Shein and Temu, right? There's so many counterfeits, there's so many fakes that are out there. Amazon is struggling with this as well. So that's kind of a challenge as well. It's the claims, it's the product themselves. But I think the influencer piece is a real challenge because we're all consumers and we're fickle too, right? So we tend to, people always ask me in terms of like wellness trends, like what's the good, what's the bad? And it's like we're constantly looking for the villain, right? And we're constantly looking for, and so there's oftentimes you have to really understand, is this a real trend? Like is this ingredient fall under a macro trend that consumers are needing? And again, that's kind of why I pulled out that mental health. Or is it just potentially just the latest X or Y in terms of flavor that we will, 3 years from now be like, oh yeah, we forgot all about that. So kind of, I would say surrounding the data with more than just social media listening.
Anything to add there, David? So I do want to ask you, David, let's talk a little bit about the challenges maybe in a unique flavor. So if you want to put something cool in, that's the watermelon thing, there's some Skittles recipe or whatever on TikTok, and you're like, hey, that might be good in a beverage. What are some things to keep in mind there? Some challenges with flavor and cost and whatnot.
Well, you're seeing a lot more collabs lately, right? These groups, everybody's trying to do a flavor or something with a bigger brand that has some recognition, either with your kids or yourselves or whoever. And so there is that challenge of trying to, there's a cost associated with trying to do a collaboration with a group. The more tricky the product is, the more difficult it is to flavor. And I'm speaking on behalf of our product, which is really difficult to flavor because we have an incredible amount of nasty tasting actives. That's why it works, unfortunately. We're continually trying to make it taste good, but we're measured up against everything that tastes good. And that's the point I'm trying to get to is taste is paramount. That's what people want. They're going to judge you on your taste before anything. A nasty, scathing, letter came out today by a group or whatever, New York Post type thing, saying how horrible our product is to drink. It's undrinkable. I mean, so we face these things every single day. You're going to face them as a brand. You're trying to bring out some cool ingredients, and cool ingredients that haven't been used much are harder to flavor. There are a lot of flavor experts out there, flavor houses that will take a crack at it, but it's super important. And I will say this, we used to have a sort of in the pre-workout world, we kind of figured flavor should be maybe 1.5 cents per serving. And now you're seeing a lot of products pushing 3, 4, 5 cents a serving for their flavoring. And the more egregious your ingredients are, you're going to have to figure out a way to get your cogs to work. My flavor is 12 cents a serving. That's how much it costs to make it work even remotely palatable. So the reality is the more you want to try something a little different, you need to leave that room for flavor because you will be judged on flavor.
So this is kind of a difficult question to answer. I hope you both can humor me. What is it possible to respond to a social media trend in the proper timeline that trend is still a thing and the year or more it takes to get that product on the shelf? And if the answer is no, why bother?
I'll start. Well, problem is packaging alone is like 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, more like 14, 15, 16 by the time your marketing team, gets their shit together basically and gets it on the label the right way, and then you get your compliance and regulatory clearance. So the answer is it is really difficult. Even nimble manufacturers can't do anything if they don't have anything to put it in. And so, that's where I say the biggest bottleneck all the time is what you want to say, and what you want to put in the product, and then how you're gonna market that. So, timeline of trying to get in, I'd say you got to give yourself 16 to 20 weeks, and you better be sprinting that entire time. And so, if you're a company or you're working with companies that have 9-month, 12-month life product cycle before they're even going to kick it off, it's going to be hard to hit that current trend and not end up trying to be a me too.
Yeah.
So getting there quick, and we know getting there quick is everything.
I think too, one of the things that we're often asked is is this a real trend or is this just a fad? And that's why I'm a total nerd. That's why I love that bubble chart, because I think the important part is to watch what's going on. Is it is it moving in terms of consumer awareness? Are they seeing this in more categories? I've laughed. In the last 6 months, my mom, who's 75, asked me about ashwagandha. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, ashwagandha is finally it's moving into mainstream here, right? But the reality is so many of the brands that are able to do this, they're over here watching emerging constantly, and they've got a bucket of these are growing, keeping their eye on, and then these are the proven. They're constantly watching this, so they're seeing when does that jump from being something it just maybe just a flash in the pan, or it's really something we should invest in. And so part of that time frame is really I think watching it across the consumer conversation. Are they being exposed to it in other categories? Is it something we should? And by the way, it's not just are they seeing it, but are there sales, and are there, to your point, loyalty? That's the other big piece that's so key here is do people buy it? And do they keep buying it? Because that's one thing we have seen on TikTok, I will tell you. We've seen this more in the vitamins and supplements and sports nutrition. Tons of disloyalty, right? I'm gonna buy it, I'm Insta influenced, I'm TikTok influenced, but I don't rebuy, right? And so that's a really important metric, I think even more so for us to all be thinking about in these social media and direct to consumer is, did they come back again?
Well, we also try to nail them with incentive subscription-like things, and that's what you see Amazon doing. If you're a brand, you want to make sure that you have that that option, some kind of a discount to incentivize them to come back, because you're absolutely right. They're going to try the next one, the next one, the next one, or whichever influencer tells them to try something. So you got to be as sticky as possible, right? You got to get consumers to stick to what you're doing in a really difficult market.
And let's, one more question before we go to the audience. Let's talk about, so when I think, and I think this is collectively, we think of TikTok, we think of Gen Z, and that's not necessarily fair. So I wanna like maybe set the stage in terms of like, is social media just for the young? And if it isn't, which I don't think it is, what does that mean for, do you go to Instagram to hit like 30 to 60, or TikTok to, like, if you're creating product, are there specific channels that you go to know that you're getting the right learnings from the right audience?
I mean, we even see it on TikTok. It even depends by category. So, TikTok across the board is like, I'm actually not on TikTok because I still think that it's something that's on our phones, but we track a lot of the trends. So we even see like vitamins and supplements tends to be older, more of the beauty products tends to be younger. Food is kind of across the board, but it really depends on the type of food. I mean, candy and gum, obviously younger, more of the beverages seems to be across the board. So I would say you could look even within a platform at specific categories to see the generational aspects as well.
Anything to add, David?
Yeah, we're trying to track the data. We talk to data folks. We actually use a third-party group to help us manage our TikTok account, our Amazon account, and help with the marketing and the trends. And then they collect the data from groups like Nielsen here and others. And so yeah, it's very data-driven, and you want to try to dive into it as much as possible. I can say this: you probably can't spend enough money on data if you're really serious about trying to get a product into the market. So,
The NXQ lady's like, yeah,
I
say
did
it
not
louder.
pay you to say that. You could never spend enough on data.
it is true. I'm telling you how much money you'll spend doing everything else that sounds really cheap at first, and then as you go after it, and then you realize you went down the wrong road, and now you're $20,000 into something that was only $2,000 to start, where for $5,000 or $6,000 you could have figured it out. And I know those numbers sound big at first. You don't want to throw $5,000 or $6,000 or $10,000 at something, but trust me, when you're sitting there realizing, this mistake is going to cost a whole hell of a lot more than that.
And then, sorry, one more question. What happens if TikTok gets banned? I don't mean to be inflammatory, I'm sorry, but what happens? I mean, how much money are we talking, like, down, like, we don't get anymore?
I mean, realistically, I think it'll be sold, but I mean, I think we're just even watching it right now again with Temu and Shein, who are coming already with the beauty products and even some health products and accessories and stuff, that those will continue to grow and be outlets, so they may have the same challenges. I think the truth is we love this level of retail, right? This frictionless retail. And so even when you think about how different apps, direct-to-consumer apps and retailer apps, just this ability to not have friction, there'll be other offerings that'll solve that for us, I think.
We're limping in. I'm not going to go send them 500 pallets and try to get them shipping stuff for me, that's for sure. I don't know. I think I have a lot of thoughts going on here that I can't talk about.
That's good, David. Yes.
For a variety of reasons, but let's just say there's an interesting thing. TikTok is forming partnerships that probably tells us something that's going on. If we start thinking about it, why are they forming partnerships with various groups? Because they themselves are probably getting ready to potentially have some issues here in the United States.
Questions? We have 6 minutes, friends, and I have more if no one else has any.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the session. I think it's really interesting and really fresh, and not so many people is talking about it, so thank you a lot. So my question is, you talked a little bit about trends and how they are growing. So my question is, how much of each of these trends you believe it comes organically, and how much can be pushed by brands with deep pockets? Because we've seen some brands that have a really big budget and they come in, they push it a lot, and they create a trend from nothing.
I think that it can happen that way. And also, I mean, the other element is if you think about all those ingredients that I showed you, I mean, things like elderberry, that was because of COVID, right? Like consumers understanding not just the ingredient, but the functionality of the ingredient around immunity. So I think there's a lot of factors that can drive a trend. It can be a major brand who starts to put in a certain ingredient, talk about a certain ingredient, but it also could be a major like need state and consumer education element as well that can kind of like all of a sudden kind of awaken a consumer awareness in terms of the interest on something.
I'll say this: the cost of influencers, if you want to try to jump into the big time influencer game, is ungodly expensive. We're a publicly traded company, so you can see our financials. I'm not going to tell you here how much money we spent on the massive influencers. The micro influencers seem to probably work a lot better. A micro influencer is, and I'm learning all this, guys. I'm 56, and my son knows how to work everything far more than I do. If I could go back to a flip phone, I would have done that tomorrow, kind of thing. So this is all kind of learning along the way as it goes. But the smaller influencers, as they're kind of coming up, they're looking for ways to get themselves promoted and promote others, and that tends to be a much easier on the pocketbook to try to get them to get to somewhere. And then that way also it won't affect you too much if there's some big issue with them. We signed influencers that got in trouble doing all kinds of stuff. Now you're in a legal battle there, and now you're in a legal battle trying to cut your deal with them and get back the money you already sent them that you agreed to on the front end, right? So this is all going to be a part of it. I think we're going to start seeing a lot more influencer manager groups that are spending a lot more time connecting with the trends specifically, because it's one thing to get influencers that have lots of followers. It's another thing to get influencers that have followers that will lead to a purchase. And that's where we were trying to find a lot more data. Not every influencer actually helps the purchasing side of things, and that's what we're all in business for, right? We need a sale.
I will also say, I think one thing, if I were, an ingredient or a food manufacturer in the room, that I would be really watching is tied to this influencer piece is there are many apps that are now out, right? And you can scan a product and it's going to say good or bad, and it's all based on ingredients, right? Thumbs up, thumbs down, Bobby approved, et cetera, right? But there's so many. And so I would also say, be really cognizant of your current ingredient stack and how it's showing up with influencers that are gaining popularity, but also kind of just watching, because they're very binary when you think about how ingredients are being judged in a lot of those apps, which can be challenges for us in the food industry.
Other questions? Yeah.
Thank you. So on the influencer subject, right? So that's been our struggle of late. Without going into too much detail and being mindful of your time, if there were a few, specific rules or tools that you can recommend on how to qualify an influencer that has a higher conversion rate versus audience size, that would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I probably can't really answer that because I'm more down operations and the R&D and all that stuff. I oversee, I've only been really sort of diving in a little bit to the influencers. One thing I can say is make sure your agreements are crystal clear. Get an attorney if you probably want to get an attorney if you're going into any kind of long-term agreement, even if it's not high dollar. You want to get an attorney because that's people are only going to do what they're required to do, especially bigger time celebrities and bigger time influencers and so forth. If they say in their agreement, we're doing 6 posts a month, they are going to do 6 posts a month. They'll probably try to only do 4 because they also agreed to do 6 for each and every other group that they're doing, and they're running out of bandwidth, right? And so that's my biggest thing to say is you got to really be crystal clear on what your expectation is from each specific person that you sign up. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there going, and then we still don't have really great ways, and maybe you're more aware of how to truly measure that ROI. Unless you get a sale that comes directly through, it's very hard to tell how much an influencer is really helping your brand.
Okay, it's 12:30. Thank you all so much for coming. Please, can you guys hang out for we have another session I think in 15 minutes. But if you have questions, they can hang out for 5 minutes. But thank you all. Happy
Thank
Supply
you,
Side
guys.
West.